What's up, Internet? It's Cameron with Venus Theory, and today we're here to answer the big question: what is the meaning of life? And how do I create a reese bass? So, as I mentioned, today we're here to talk about the reese bass, a thing I get asked about all the time. How do I make them? Why does mine sound this way? Blah, 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 blah. 9 times out of 10, the answer is a lot of resampling or just the way it turned out. Most of my basses are just happy accidents, and I'm sure if you talk to most other producers, they're going to tell you the same thing. So, when I first started out with production and reading forums and stuff, everybody would always talk about, 2 saw waves detuned, resample, do a bunch of stuff, rinse and repeat. So basically, today's video, we're going to go over my top 6 bass plugins, the ones I use all the time to make basses, and talk a little bit about maybe some processing stuff, and mostly just to reiterate the point of it doesn't really matter what you have, it's how you use it. So let's hop into Cubase and get started. Alright guys, so we're here in Cubase, and we're going to go over the top 6 bass plugins I use all the time. So the other question is, what is the meaning of life? Of course, that is 42. So let's move on and get started. So we're going to go over these 6 synthesizers today. We have Waves, Element, Sylenth by Leonard Digital, FabFilter Twin 2, Steinberg Retrolog, Native Instruments FM8, and Native Instruments Absynth. So we're just going to go through what these sound like and why I like them and how you can get started creating a reese bass. So as I mentioned, the basic theory of reese and reesage is to detune shit and then fuck with it, and eventually it'll sound good. So why do I use these different ones, and what are the applications? And these are the questions that I think separate the just starting out guy from someone who knows what they're doing. Is you don't just use one synth over and over. You use different ones for different reasons. So what I've gone ahead and done here beforehand is I've programmed out a bass line. It's all the same bass line, and then I've treated each of these basses with pretty much the same processing. Some of them just needed a level lift, so that's why there's a second H comp, and then they're all getting run through some extra distortion, yada yada yada. That's basically it. So before we dive into the how and why, let's go ahead and just listen to the bass. So this is the Waves Element version. So cool, sounds good. This is the Sylenth version. So sounds way different. FabFilter Twin 2. Very similar to Sylenth, but different. Retrolog. So I'll start right off the bat and say Retrolog is my favorite. I don't know why. It's just fat, full, and nice, and I love it. FM8. Great synth all around. And finally, Absynth, one of my favorites for weird, twisty shit. So now let's get into the how and why. So in terms of why these are my top 6, these are the ones I use most often. I have other synths and stuff, but I don't really touch them all that much because I tend to gravitate towards these for my own music. Obviously, there's Serum, and you'll probably notice, why isn't Serum on here? Well, honestly, I've started to drift away from it, and I'm kind of over it, to be honest. However, Serum is very, very good and is obviously extremely popular for good reason. So why would I use these 6? All of them are available for purchase. Retrolog, although it is a Cubase stock synth, you can buy this and use it in any DAW as a VST, so highly, highly recommend it. So a little bit about how and why. Waves Element. Let's pop this guy open. So Element and Retrolog are really very similar. They're just virtual analog emulation things. So the difference between these two really is that I like Retrolog and I don't really like Element, but Element does have a few weird quirks like the sine mod, and
I don't know, just the way that it behaves. It's got a lot of weird quirks to it, kind of like a real analog synth. So I really, really like this one. I think there's also Element 2 now, but I don't have that. However, I might pick that up eventually and maybe just kind of do an overview on it. So really between these two, DistroKid does get a lot more use just because I like all the options it has, and it does have a really fat sound, and I'm really into those kind of big, greasy basses. So usually for most of my workhorse applications, Element or DistroKid is like my go-to. Sylenth, obviously everybody's got a pirated copy, and Sylenth is really good for those really wide bass sounds. I don't know why Sylenth just sounds so wide, but you can hear it when we play it again. It just fills out really well. So Sylenth I use a ton for like just that big, wide, huge bass sound. So that's a really good one. And it also does have a really nice low end to it. So this is a good one for kind of like that, I don't know, sub shaker type of feel, especially if you're doing something more culprit-y or something like that. Fab Filter Twin 2, I guess I'll show you guys this one because everyone knows what Sylenth looks like. So Twin 2 is really interesting, and it's kind of a strange little beast. So you get 3 oscillators, and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. There's different waves and all that, but it's a really, really good synth, and obviously Fab Filter's GUIs are incredible, and it's very easy to get started. I think this is probably the cheapest one out of all of these. I may not be correct in that, but whatever. The point being, if you're just getting started and you're very disappointed with your stock synths, Fab Filter Twin 2 is surprisingly effective, and it comes with a bazillion presets. So DistroKid we already talked about, but basically this is my go-to synth for everything that I do. FM8 is obviously resurging in popularity quite a bit after Skrillex was like, yo, I use FM8. And FM synths in general are very popular right now just due to the whole Neuro scene and whatever dubstep has become since the 2010s and onward to now. So FM8, I highly recommend it. It's just extremely effective at what it does, and it's really, really good for those big, thick, centered basses. So if we play this one and compare it to something like Sylenth, you'll hear the difference. So obviously, the patch isn't exactly the same, but it's pretty damn close. So FM8 is like this. Really big, fat low end. And Sylenth sounds like this, if I unmute it. Obviously, Sylenth is way brighter because of the way I programmed that patch, but you get the point, is that FM8 is really good for those centered and focused sounds, and I really, really like it for that. Finally, this brings us to Absynth, which I feel like people have and they just don't use, because Absynth is probably one of the uglier synths in terms of like the overall GUI and how the fuck do I use this thing. So Absynth was a lot like Contact. It took me a few years to really sit down and go, oh, gotcha. So Absynth, if you don't have it, definitely recommend it just for the presets, really, because, I mean, the preset browser, oh my god, there's 18 billion awesome sounds and pads and drum sounds, and, like, you can, you know, you can play with presets for days and just always find new stuff, especially with the mutation button and, you know, tweaking all this and writing automation. Like, it's an incredible synth and really, really powerful. I really like Absynth for big, weird, twisty reeses because you can do just kind of a lot of stuff in it, especially like the mod section here. You can do like extra filters, combs, wave shapers, frequency shifters, ring mods, and all sorts of crazy stuff. So Absynth, if you don't have it, definitely check it out, because this, once you really sit down and start messing with it, especially with like the envelopes and stuff, it's just crazy. It's right up there with Serum in terms of like Neuro people should own this. So without all the other stuff in the background, this is what that Absynth patch sounds like. And you can hear that's a really sick bass. It's huge. Without the extra processing, this is what it sounds like. but especially just after some extra distortion, you can get some really big, nasty sounds out of it. So yeah, these are basically the top 6. If I had to buy some stuff, I would look into one of these. So that's the essential how do I reese.
And that's it for this video, guys. So I hope you liked this, and I hope you learned something. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.